My whole life, people told me how pretty I was. So you know what? I never thought I had to work hard in school or work on friendships or my personality, none of it. And then I stopped modeling and I realized I didn't have much on the inside. And I don't want that for you.
So here's the thing about Gabrielle Solis from Desperate Housewives. Out of any of the main 4 housewives, or honestly any other character on this show, Gabrielle Solis developed the most. The difference between where her arc began and where it ends is nothing short of astonishing, and she goes through a complete transformation throughout the 8 seasons. Before coming to Wisteria Lane, she was a top-tier runway model with a glamorous life and tons of money. As a result, she begins the show extremely conceited and selfish, and dissatisfied with her current life. And, due to this deep-seated unhappiness, she does the most reprehensible thing she's ever done. Something that makes a ton of fans stop watching this show, or at least consider how they could ever sympathize with this character again. She has an affair with an underage boy, beginning when he was just 16 years old. You might wonder why she has no qualms about beginning this relationship, or how she doesn't view it as wrong in any way during the start of the series, but it makes more sense when you examine where Gabrielle came from. She became a model after fleeing her hometown, as her stepfather was sexually abusing her without her mother's knowledge. She was never able to fully come forward or come to terms with this abuse, and has spent years ignoring the pain and refusing to deal with it. As a result, I think she has a skewed view of the meaning of sex. She even tells Susan that the affair doesn't mean anything, as it's just sex, despite the fact that we all know the importance these types of relationships have on our emotional state and how they can affect us as we grow. Is this an excuse for what is factually statutory rape? No, not at all. Not even close. But it gives you some insight into her character that's important for her development later on in the series. Over the course of season 1, however, she begins to realize the severity of her transgression here, as her friends begin to weigh in on what she's doing, as his parents find out, and as she learns more and more how innocent John is and how she's taking advantage of that. She begins to see that it isn't just harmless fun at all, and that there are real people being hurt in this little fling, especially since it's repeatedly used against her and threatened to be outed if she doesn't comply. And as a result, she resolves to stick by Carlos through his imprisonment on slave labor. Even after being horrifically shocked at what he's done, she still resolves to stay loyal to him while he's in jail and to do everything she can to keep their marriage together in the process. Unfortunately, she does slide back into this affair after Carlos physically forces her to sign the post-nup agreement in an attempt to get back at Carlos after losing the upper hand in a rather extreme way, which is honestly quite realistic, as nobody goes through development in a completely linear fashion. There's always relapses along the way. But ultimately, the final nail in the coffin is when she realizes that her affair with John was childish and immature. But, you know, she doesn't exactly see it as criminal behavior quite yet. After hearing John say he's already in love with another woman whose lawn he's mowing. Not a euphemism. This is ultimately one of my favorite moments, where she admits how flat out stupid she's been acting for these first couple seasons, and goes back to Carlos, understanding more how much she must have hurt him, and for no purpose except her own boredom. And that's why she's able to stick with him through his imprisonment.
I was really selfish and stupid. And I'm sorry. I really am sorry. That's all I had to say, really.
You know what? That is the best anniversary gift that you've ever given me.
Again, she still has a long way to go in understanding the gravity of what she's done to John Rowland, but this is a very important first step. It's the first time she really admits culpability and accepts responsibility for her own mistakes, and sets extremely important groundwork for her character going forward. But even besides this egregious act, she's just generally not a very kind or magnanimous person, especially when we see how she treats her own staff. Poor Yao Lin is so berated and belittled throughout the entire season. Gabby makes her feel as if she's not worth as much as she is, and that her life generally has less value, which is just overtly cruel. It's not until Gabby has her own money problems when Carlos stops working and goes to prison that she can understand the value of hard work, and how even those who have, quote, made it can even end up flat on their face from time to time. The scene where Yao Lin forces her to do her makeup is just so wonderfully humbling for Gabby, even if she protests that she's still going to be back on top. Plus, Yao Lin is just iconic in this scene. Props to Lucille Sung for this feisty performance. It's really good. It also just serves to shatter this perception she has of her own position in life as better than those around her. Her husband too, for that matter. They lose their ability to put themselves on top after having to face the reality of using a porta potty in their own backyard because they can't afford to fix the pipes. I think this very forceful assertion that she's above everyone and that her life is perfect comes from her career as a model and her upbringing where her mother forced her to smile. But in that cutthroat industry, she worked hard to triumph over others and to reach the top. And she needed to discern herself from other candidates for whatever job she was gunning for, and had to make herself seem the perfect choice. And that advice that her mother gave her when she was young about smiling through the pain definitely helped. We also reveal at the start of the show she had trouble making friends with our main cast, even though they begin extremely close to one another. In The Best Thing That Ever Could Have Happened, we see that Gabrielle couldn't help but try and prove to the other women on the lane that she was better, and to show off how amazingly glamorous and perfect her life was. But to be able to actually overcome that loneliness, she has to admit to the others and herself that she doesn't have a perfect life, and that she isn't better than any one of them. She has problems, vulnerabilities, and faults just like everyone else on Wisteria Lane, and the rest of the world does. And near the end of the first season, she's faced with one of the biggest changes to her lifestyle possible. One that threatens all of that glamour that she holds so dear. A pregnancy. And while Carlos does force this on her, extremely wrongfully, she does resolve to accept this duty and to move forward with Carlos through this very long and demanding process. Just to be clear, I hate Carlos for messing with her birth control. It is honestly an actual crime that he does not get near enough flack for, but it does lead to some important development for Gabby herself. It takes her a while to accept that she even could have a different path for herself, and that she might have a purpose beyond her marriage to Carlos itself, and being the fabulous, gorgeous person that she always is. And she eventually realizes that she actually does want the child, even though she may have denied it for a large part of her pregnancy when she loses it after the accident with Caleb. I love the final message delivered by Mary Alice at the end of this episode.
Most amazing of all, cameras can quietly and clearly reveal to us our dreams. Dreams we didn't even know we had.
So true, first of all. Gabby had put up this strong wall as someone who would never change or sacrifice any of her lifestyle, but ends up finding a deep desire to care for children that she never really even knew existed within her. And we don't find out until later in the series that her desire to protect and care for children stems from this abuse that she faced as a child herself. I'll dive more into this later. And then she moves on to put immense effort throughout season 2 to get a child after she learns that she might not be able to have them herself. I love the moment after they're rejected from adopting because they run into the mother of the teenager that Gabby raped. Not only is that a rather fitting punishment since Gabby never faces prison time for her crime, I mean, you can't really fault Helen Roland for thinking Gabby unfit to be a mother after what she did to her own child, but while Carlos resolves that they shouldn't be parents because they're bad people, Gabby fights to prove that they deserve to have children as much as anyone else, even despite their mistakes. And Carlos is able to see that she truly does want children and isn't just doing this for him. I think a lot of people, pretty rightfully, criticize this show for trying to force Gabrielle into motherhood, but we do see a plethora of evidence that she actually does desire this life. Maybe a separate video essay is necessary on the faults of the show, although I'm not sure that's my realm. I am PosiTVty. I mean, they can't adopt in the traditional sense, so they work hard and pay a lot with an individual lawyer to be able to, and when that doesn't work out, they move on to surrogacy, and they take a lot of hits too. After raising the baby they adopt from Libby for several days, she decides to parent it herself, essentially ripping it out of Gabby and Carlos's arms. It's a really tragic scene, and it shows you the depth of the love that Gabrielle has for her children in general, and how much she did want this life. And then, with the surrogacy, they end up having a mistake where their egg was implanted in somebody else, and it doesn't take, and all of this was false hope. Another huge hit to this endeavor that makes them take a little bit more time to actually get there. Even before this, when she loses her first child, she really struggles to process and fully come to terms with how much the loss hurts her. She tries to put up a wall, insisting that she's the same and that this can't faze her, but it takes a lot of effort from Carlos via Danny Trejo, because Carlos is still in prison, to get her to admit her grief and allow herself to feel that pain. As we learn later, her mother raised her to be perfect, even when her father was sick. She wasn't allowed to cry or frown, and had to plaster a smile on as much as she could, even when the unimaginable happened to her after her father had passed.
Those last weeks, every day, we thought we were gonna lose him. My mom would say, no tears. Daddy wants to see you smiling. If you're gonna cry, you can't go in. So, last night, I sat there and I watched him die. His eyes were closed, but I thought he could still see me. So I kept smiling. Oh my God. But on the plus side, I made a pretty good career out of knowing how to smile when I didn't really feel like it.
And, as Gabby says, she only continued this pattern into her later life, as her entire career as a model was based on smiling when she didn't really feel like it, covering up any imperfection, not just on the outside, but with their emotional and mental states as well. But near the end of season 2, she's able to fully understand the consequences of her own actions when Carlos cheats on her. Not that he was justified, far from it, but it did happen to show her viscerally what a huge emotional impact it can have on a person. She even moves to divorce Carlos the next season due to this betrayal. I think that this really puts into perspective for her what sort of damage it can do to a relationship. Gabby's still pretty selfish at this point, so she can really only learn when it pertains to her, even if Susan vividly articulates how much Carl hurt her when he cheated. And throughout season 3, she learns how to be without Carlos in her life, which is extremely important for her development going forward. After Zach Young tells her that everyone on the lane always saw her as helpless and needy, she feels determined to prove that she does not need to rely on a man to support her. So when Victor Lang pursues her, she vehemently avoids him, especially when he shows signs of being similar to how Carlos was when they were first married, which definitely signals how Gabby has changed over the couple seasons that we've known her. Now, Victor is an expert liar, so he does manage to prove to her that he could be a good husband, but it's ultimately a moot point as he repeatedly ignores her wishes. And in this abuse, she relapses on the progress she's made and cheats on him with Carlos. I think that this is a common pattern with Gabrielle's behavior, where when she feels slighted or mistreated, she feels she gets a pass to do immoral things or to then mistreat other people. And it's only until far later when she's able to realize the consequences of her actions, when the heat of the moment has really already died down. Also throughout this season, Gabrielle's huge ego is kind of taken apart, as when she goes back to modeling, she's only met with moderate success, and nobody fawns over her any longer. She's not the young, hot thing anymore, and while she's still expected to be the center of attention, as her agent puts it, everyone else has moved on. She has to accept that her life has simply changed, and that everything moves forward when she leaves. So, she goes back to Fairview, resolved to continue the new life she's forged for herself without a man. They play with this concept a couple times throughout the series, where later, in season 6, when Gabrielle goes back to New York to reconnect with her modeling roots, it's revealed that her terrible attitude actually soured a lot of her connections, and her career probably would have gone down in flames anyway, which is a great way to show not only how far Gabrielle has changed, but also to help her teach Anna, who is a mirror of herself, and I'll get more into this later. But she eventually proves that she's still come pretty far, even with this relapse after the tornado in season 4, when she sticks with Carlos after he goes blind and resolves to take care of the both of them through all of it. And although sometimes she isn't the most supportive person on the planet towards him, which I do kind of find consistent character writing. It's selfless, but it's Gabby Solis brand selflessness. She does have no regrets about taking Carlos back and resolves to take care of the house and their family while he finds a way to work. I think old Gabby might have left him, quite honestly. She even ends up selling a lot of her clothes and precious jewelry over the years as they struggle further and further with money. This is really the largest indicator of how much she truly cares for her family over her former life. She definitively chooses her responsibility to her husband and children rather than the glitz and glamour of her old lifestyle. Which brings us to perhaps the biggest turn for her character after the time skip in season 4, where her life swiftly takes an entirely different course than she intended. And she has 2 children. Like Gabby says, she had given up on this dream to have children after the awful timing of Carlos's betrayal and their repeated failures to adopt and the debacle with their surrogate, but once given the opportunity again, she accepts the responsibility and works hard to grow and develop as a mother. I see a lot of people criticizing Gabby's treatment of her children and her skill as a mother, but I think her inexperience is more there to represent the fact that Gabby had a lack of a significant and healthy parental role model as a child. Her father died when she was extremely young and was likely the only good influence she had growing up. Her mother was selfish, inconsiderate, and greedy, and her stepfather was a straight-up monster. So her journey through motherhood is filled with mistakes and lots of lessons. The other mothers on Wisteria Lane and Carlos are able to guide her in the right direction when she steps too far out of line, and I think they all do have a great effect on her. And while she does often employ harsh or shocking methods to control her children, she does develop visibly into a far better mother by the end of the series. She makes mistakes with their safety while overcompensating after being criticized for her parenting skills. She tries to protect her own image while hurting her daughters, but in every single one of these errors, she learns something new about being a parent and resolves to do better in the future. She has immense love for her children, and she wants to do right by them. But parents are destined to make mistakes, and when you've spent a lot of your life being as selfish as Gabby, it's a hard adjustment to care more for others than yourself. Which is why she struggles to go without makeup to set a good example for her daughter. It's why she feels the need for her daughter to do exceptionally well in the talent show, to beat out other parents. There's an adjustment that has to be made for her to fully excel in this new role, and that's exactly what we see her going through the latter half of this series. She has to unlearn a lot of that behavior that modeling and her mother taught her. For example, she learns to just be proud of Juanita for what she's accomplished, not worrying about how her performance makes her look as a mother or competing with those around her to earn the top spot. Juanita worked hard, and she's proud of her for that. Not only this, but Gabby's social life also takes a very different turn after this time skip as her husband and her begin to struggle for money and she's required to cut more corners. She loses the time and ability to keep herself looking fully glamorous, although I will assert that she never looked nearly as bad as the writing in this show made her out to be, but that's most likely just the Eva Longoria effect. She loses the high fashion, the expensive jewelry, the stylish cars, and she even loses her status in the local culture, no longer being invited to fancy parties or luxurious galas. But she finds that she's still satisfied with her life, and while, yes, she would prefer to have time for more upkeep with her own appearance, the life she's built for herself could fulfill her on its own, evidenced by the fact that when Virginia tries to buy her family off, she insists on sticking by her daughters for the sake of their future and their relationship. She truly cares about that more than money. And when she does dip back into that lifestyle after Carlos regains his sight and accepts a new job, she almost regresses into those old, awful habits. Luckily, Edie is able to give her a wake-up call and helps remind her to not lose everything that she's learned, even if she wishes to return to that glamorous Gabby that she used to be. I love the little moment where she actually appreciates Jean, her personal shopper, showing her genuine kindness after realizing how poorly she's been treating her.
Jean, wait. What is it? Is there a problem?
No, it's perfect. I just want to tell you how helpful you've been to me over the years, and I'm really grateful. Thank you.
This is the new Gabby, and while yes, she is once again working to look glamorous and showing off a little bit more, she still has come a long way, and she is going to prove that to the people around her. But even after all this, they're still able to successfully play around with Gabby and her development in really unique ways. I mean, there's 3 more seasons, right? So in season 6, it's with the arrival of her niece, Anna. Anna is the spitting image of Gabby when she was her age, and forces Gabby to re-examine her own flaws and development in a very deep-seated way, especially when she begins wanting to date none other than John Rowland, who is now a full adult flirting with a teenager. It hurts how visible the cycles of abuse are on this show, but it does help her see the other side of that conflict, and very vividly puts her into Helen Rowland's shoes. Again, helping her bit by bit understand further how much pain she's caused other people and the gravity of this mistake that she made. The I'm happy monologue, though, is one of the most important parts of Gabby's development over the series, and comes out of this arc with John Rowland returning.
I spend my days thinking about detergent and groceries, or how I'm gonna get the spot out of the upholstery. It's not at all the life I thought I'd choose for myself. But some days, I look up and I realize I'm happy. I'm honest to God happy with my life.
She is able to reflect on why she went after John in the first place, and upon considering this route again, she doesn't really find it appealing. She's developed to the point where she's finally satisfied with her life, and she isn't wanting for anything. But in general, Anna had that same mentality that Gabrielle had when she was her age, that she can make it and escape everything awful that's happened to her. She's in a rush to get on with her life, not really ever having a stable childhood, and thinking that she doesn't actually need one going forward. But Gabby, who only left home because she had to, wants to be able to give her a piece of that stable home life, because it's something she was never able to get, or at least only for a little, as her time with her father was cut short. She wants to make sure Anna's ready before she goes out into the world, so that Anna doesn't make the same mistakes Gabby did. Plus, at the end of this season, we see her admit her own flaws with Angie Boland, and even moves to help her through the extremely stressful situation that arises when the father of her child shows up, who also happens to be an eco-terrorist. Season 6 is kinda wild, but you know, that's not what we're talking about. It's incredible the lengths she goes to help Angie out, and to make sure that this family ends up safe, and it is a far cry from anything the old Gabby would have done, even for her close friends, honestly. But really, season 7 and 8 is likely the period with the most visceral and visible development for her, as she is forced to face the worst memories in her past as a result of the tragedies in her present. After learning about and then subsequently losing her biological daughter, she turns to a therapist to help process her grief. She tries to on her own at first, but ultimately grows to develop an unhealthy obsession with a doll stemming from the sudden loss of Grace. But she is willing to admit that she needs help. However, when she does go to therapy, she's forced to discuss her childhood for the first time in actual years. As Carlos tells us, Gabby never really confides in anyone about what happened with her stepfather. She only told him at one point because she felt he deserved to know, but didn't ever really talk about it again. Like I said earlier in the video, she never really fully processes and comes to terms with the abuse she faced as a child, and that's why she ended up repeating the cycle with John Rowland. Again, not an excuse. She spends all this time essentially doing what her mom always told her, putting on a happy face whenever asked about her past, to avoid the negative emotions coming to the surface. But after she visits her hometown and confronts the nun who never believed her, she's able to fully address what happened to her, and ultimately tackle these issues head on to be able to move forward with her life. Unfortunately for her, her stepfather, still very much alive, follows her back home. Blah. And as soon as she realizes this, Gabby takes control of the situation in a way that we've really never seen from her before. She even purchases a gun, takes lessons, and gets her stepfather on his knees and at her mercy. How empowering it must have felt for her, even if it was also completely terrifying, to get him to admit exactly what he did to her and to be able to face him in a position of power. Again, however, her stepfather follows her back to her home and threatens to hurt her all over again. He puts her right back in that position she was in years ago, pulling that fear back to the surface until Carlos ends him once and for all. And for that, Gabby is eternally grateful to Carlos. All throughout season 8 in the cover-up with Bree, she avoids involving Carlos to preserve his fragile emotional state and resolves to work to protect him from prosecution because he helped her overcome her greatest fear of all. And process it even before that. Even when things turn bad for Bree, to the point where someone has to come forward lest she go to jail, Gabby refuses to let Carlos admit his crime. She goes so far as to burst into the courtroom, ready to confess that it was her, taking all the blame in an effort to save her husband. This is likely one of the most selfless things she was ever willing to do, even if she was never actually able to fully do it since McCluskey confessed for her. But it's clear to everyone that she was absolutely ready to take the blame to save her friend and her husband, and that is indeed extremely admirable. Plus, in this season, she allows Carlos to follow his dreams and pursue the job he truly wants, although there is some initial pushback. Even if it doesn't make money, then resolving to pitch in herself so that they can keep the same lifestyle, which isn't necessarily Carlos's desire, but she wants to help, is the point. And she ends up making a really successful career for herself entirely suited to her skill set. Such a great way to end her arc with Grace after after developing her so thoughtfully for 8 straight seasons. She is actually willing to put in the work and build something from the ground up, and ends up reaping the rewards for doing so, having her own show on a shopping network, and being able to live the glamorous life along with the loving family that she always wanted. Overall, Gabrielle Solis proves time and again how far she's come since the start of the show, even if there are a few relapses here and there. Ultimately, she's able to come to terms with the gravity of her mistakes and forge a beautiful life for herself that she never could have dreamt of or would have dreamt of before her time on Wisteria Lane. But thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate all the support you guys give, but if you want to support us further, you can go to patreon.com/PosiTVty. That's PosiTVty. There you get all these videos early, but you can also view the unedited versions of these essays, so you can hear all of my mistakes. You can hear the essays without any corrections. You can vote on what you want to see on the channel. It's a great way to get more content for yourself, but also support us in the process. But anyway, like I said, thank you for watching, and we will see you for the next video. Let me know what you would like to see, whether that be Desperate Housewives or any other TV show you enjoy. Have a great day.